just have a sort of a assortment of finish up the next steps. So I'll just do the survey turn and you can do the next steps. So one thing that we didn't get to yesterday, and again, we're going to maybe send some follow-up questions, but one of our recommendations, we have to pull it back out, was this idea that say that it's a general good practice that schools conduct a student and teacher climate survey. In many ways to help inform like tier 1 responses and the root cause, support the root cause analysis, and also sort of on the prevention side, which is where you say tier 1, that is a piece of data that you don't, it helps you like see like what are some of those tier 1 areas you need to go at, what are some of those prevention things, and even to the extent we make this argument over time that there's certain generative things all schools should be doing in order to have all kids on a post-secondary success track. Absent some sort of survey of teacher and students, like you're not going to know, are they there or not, you know? So we're not advocating, you know, so it's a little bit different because this is going to be largely school level analysis. It's not going to be so much level analysis. But whereas in our recommendation side, we're proposing that be a sort of a standard practice of this larger pathways to adult success effort. And so any quick thoughts on is that a horrible idea, good idea, problematic idea? We're gonna
the blind people do a survey that's in a lot of states, and there's actually survey that you just do.
Yep. Yeah, and so, you know, some states and districts already do this as a matter of course, but some don't. And so it's good that I think we'll see some of our recommended practice areas.
I thought about the school climate survey, wondering how we would envision that data being used, because that's where we see sort of the dilemmas happen.
Right. Well, I think our recommendation is it is more that school level look. So it is more that tier 1, it sort of informs tier 1 actions. It helps identify areas for prevention. And we're saying it's also a check against this idea that are you supplying these basic strong things we think everyone should be supplying to all kids up front. If your survey says no in a domain, that gives you some directionality.
What can be really interesting about those surveys, I think, too, is the mismatch sometimes between teacher perceptions and student perceptions and that gap. So I think that helps us in the teacher effectiveness and quality piece as well. Do we really see agency among the professionals and the students? But just to throw in there, would we want to consider parents as well in some way, shape, or form in that school community kind of climate culture survey?
And Say Yes actually implements a parent and student survey in Buffalo, which is just kind of rolling out right now. And it's both school climate, but also a lot of questions about student well-being. So access to healthy food, to primary care and things like that, because part of Say Yes's model is to actually provide a lot of those and convene a lot of those wraparound supports. And they done it with teachers before, but it's been a really heavy lift. So I've decided to only do it with teachers for students who are off track, who are identified as off track through several of the student and parent and other indicators. So it's partly teachers, partly not.
Really?
So something I came up yesterday when Eric and I were talking about climate surveys, that some districts use them almost sometimes in a punitive way. They may appear on report cards, and so there might be some tensions there with people actually wanting to use that data. I think just listening to people's comments, just a way to strengthen the recommendation is to kind of talk about how to use the data, to triangulate some findings, just some stronger language around why you should use that data, because they probably have been getting a different message from their district.
And there's also the point of keeping it separate from accountability.
And
that goes into laying the groundwork when you roll something out, to make it clear what the purpose is and what the purpose is not.
So we built it into our accountability system.
I know.
And I would say we have not had negative feedback because the school and the principals and the teachers have come to realize that it's something that is within their ability to change. And there's almost a direct correlation that if you're green with your school climate, you're going to have better academic outcomes. So, if there's been negative pushback on it, I haven't seen it or heard it.
But that's probably just because of the way the state is used to.
Right.
They haven't used it like that, stick to bat you over the head. So.
I was curious, thinking just from the data perspective, as Sarah was talking about building like a predictive analytics piece, bigger than the school climate survey idea, but are there school level indicators that you might want to, or inputs that we might want to consider in building predictive analytics and a climate survey value might be an interesting piece to throw in?
Yeah, very much.
And I was going to say, this might be another way to connect to higher ed as well. So at Arizona State, we do a very large comprehensive freshman connection survey, and we ask questions like, you know, do you feel you're in charge of your own learning? Do you feel high school prepared you for, you know, your first year of classes, things like that, so that you know, schools and districts can validate on, you know, some of the larger things, so students can get that student perspective, you know, through their first year of coursework or first semester.
And it's going to be really useful to really some of these transition supports, right? Because you can also ask kids, say, in 12th grade, you know what I'm saying? Like, to see like where people are feeling more ready, and then be validated by, do they really feel that way after 1 year of like post-secondary?
At Portland State, we have, Portland State University has partnered with our GEAR Up grant. And GEAR Up, they came up with a survey of students around their experience of feeling inclusion and cultural responsiveness by their teachers, and then used that data to partner with our community college for students who have recently graduated to come back and basically be what they're calling near peer mentors, but for teachers. So they're in the classrooms of the teachers that the students identified as being the least culturally responsive. And then these near peer mentors are coming into the classroom and it's, the teachers have to be willing, but it's really like the teachers being like, yeah, I don't know what I don't know about my practices that are negatively impacting kids. And so these near peer mentors are coming into the classroom to support them and to help them shift their practices based on their observations, and they are recent high school graduates. So, and it's not evaluative. And so it's been, they're just in their second year of collecting the data, but they're pretty excited about it, using this survey and really tying it to shifting teacher practices with their GEAR Up grant. And we're talking about how do we, it's only in 2 of our high schools, so how do we think about it more broadly. So it's in terms of using that survey data for readiness and changing practices.
Yeah, it's very nice model.
And that's good too, because then you're getting the continuous feedback. And
Right.
so you're on that loop where you have more rapid cycle improvement. So sometimes with climate surveys, you might not get it as frequently. So you might be doing things and you don't necessarily know if those interventions are working for months.
Right. And then
That
they
gives us
compare it
quicker.
with our climate fidelity tool at the school level. So then they're like, are we seeing it, these teacher practices actually translate into shifts?
Just one last plug to kind of build on what Carla was saying. I think we should make sure that some of the recommendation around climate includes the idea of cultural responsiveness. Not all climate surveys do a good job of that.
Thank you.
That's a good idea. Is anybody who wants to send in resources? You know, we're collecting them. We'd like to share them eventually. So send them on in and we'll keep on collecting them. Okay, next steps. I have a couple of quick announcements, and then we're going to go on towards planning. One is that Berea College is sponsoring a Rural Summit. And Penny, would you like to say a little bit about it, just to let people know?
Sure, thank you. So on May 14th and 15th, Partners for Education at Berea College is hosting the Rural College Access and Success Summit in beautiful Lexington, Kentucky. If you're familiar with rural areas, you'll know that Lexington is not really rural, although if you're from Chicago, you might think it is. But it's the closest spot that we had to an airport and then a venue big enough to hold a number of participants that we hope to get. So the summit will bring together rural practitioners and organizations to share strategies on ensuring that rural youth can successfully transition from high school to college and career. So if you'd like more information, just please see me after, and I'll be glad to give you the flyer.
And I think your name and email address is also in the folder.
Yes.
Participant list. So that was number one. Number two, if anybody knows of a good female superintendent who has a demonstrated track record of success in her district, we'd very much like that. One of the ideas we've had for the May meeting is creating a summary of all the good ideas here, sharing it with a panel of superintendents, and having them react and comment from their perspective. Bring that as a new voice into the conversation. But as I look through all my files, mental Rolodex, I am not coming up with too many female superintendents. Yeah.
Dr. White, my superintendent came from one of our local communities.
Send me their
Names.
names and emails in just a couple sentences. Also, how big the district is, because I would like to get a mix of small district, medium, and large, but not huge.
Demonstrated success in general, overall?
Raising graduation rates, and if you're in a state where you collect entrance or persistence in college, which a few states do. I think Kentucky's database now shows progress in college, at least. Georgia shows add that fact to you. You have to use, in this case, the data we get. The next question was, we are short on people from the Midwest in this group. We have great representation from the South. We've got great representation from California, into Nevada, up to Oregon. We don't have much, other than Jenny and Nate, from the Midwest.
Ohio.
And Ohio. And going west, the Dakotas, they've not got a lot of students there. But again, go through your mental Rolodexes, and if you think of the kind of person, and what we asked for before was kind of eclectic, out-of-the-box thinkers. That's what we've got in this group, but very knowledgeable. And then, because we are going into and Michigan and Minnesota, can't forget those. That's one group of suggestions if you have some. And the other is, as you know, in May we're going to start moving into dissemination, or thinking about how we're going to disseminate. And so if you know people you want to recommend from organizations that have networks, and this goes back to one of our very first meetings in the planning grant, suggest some. We really appreciate that. We'd like to start doing our own slow pilot rollout, if you will, gradually educating people is what we're all about. So those are my key asks right now. Email works just great. But we wanted to go on to some next steps. And one of those next steps is the idea of suggesting places that we could pilot our ideas. Say beginning next fall, which means that beginning this spring, we need to be talking with them. And we haven't set up any criteria for them. And maybe it would be useful to have a quick discussion of what criteria would be. If you think of your districts, or schools, where would you want to try something like this? We talked a lot about time scale, trouble, or pain, rolling things out, training people, getting new ideas accepted. What do you think? I think it's a good idea, number one.
So one criteria, Joanna, one criteria that I think of, I have a district in mind, but it's a very small district, but they have a collaborative agreement currently with their historical black college that's nearby. And so It's an independent school district, they already have that collaboration set. I don't know how much of this kind of early warning system work they're doing and what they're thinking of as far as the transition. That may be a little too small because it's one school district, one college, but there could be some interesting, I think, proof of concept there.
I don't think it's too small at all. Contained.
I think Mount Vale, got Susan, Wednesday, John Tyson, and myself. And we had 3 colleges, or 4 colleges in that room. Okay. Email these suggestions. Okay. Erica, you had your.
Oh, I'm just, when you initially asked that question, my first thought was that it has to be from a wide variety of demographics. You know, we need to look at not just urban, but rural, suburban, et cetera, small and large. I think that's only going to really strengthen the work of the pilot if we can show that this work is not just for urban school districts, et cetera. So I think that would be an important thing to put on your list as you're looking for places to pilot, to make sure that there's that wide variety.
Okay. Mark?
I'm thinking about the tool from NERN, the National Implementation something, and they have a hexagon tool that looks at levels of readiness for different things. And I've always wanted to use that before going into a school with early warning because I want to make sure they're ready for it.
Well, send it to me and let's talk about it. Because yes, that question of readiness is something we have to address at all.
Some marker that shows that they already are deep into collaboration and collective work, so that you're not having to go in and build that capacity.
And what would that be? What like that?
I think they would need to help present the case for how they are being collaborative. But what we talked about in terms of whether they're intermediaries, what role they play, parent coming, community engagement. I mean, I mentioned Bob, I think this is every bit as much a workforce development issue as it is an education issue. So were they able to articulate that their business community and the technical college and higher ed institution partners are with them on board too.
And we have IT support. IT support. And I was thinking also an intermediary organization or state or district, we have good relationships with them so that we can communicate with them well back and forth.
Yeah, and in the political context, while that shouldn't exclude anyone, is, you know, are they, if they're outside of the state capital, are they working with the leadership of their state capital so that if you go in and invest the time and nobody's listening to them in the rest of the state, that's not
That's right,
going to be
and
very
that goes
helpful.
back to that networking discussion essentially. Is this a seedbed for future development?
I'm wondering about the data sharing relationships in higher education. The district is one thing, but the higher ed, and then whether there's data sharing with the employment, whether that's got to be federal or state or something. But I just think it makes, you can go so much further with the work later on if you have those data relationships.
Right,
It's great.
absolutely. All right.
I'm wondering too if we would want to consider whether a pilot district and or school had some context about early warning, or if we want it to be sort of blank slate. If they tried it before in a different way and they want plus, or if they are sort of brand new to it. No.
And that's my thought, because the purpose of this would be to provide support. So if they already have a whole bunch of stuff that's already there, unless we're evaluating what they currently have, how are we, I don't know, I guess I'm just trying to understand, like, what is the purpose? If we're doing this to say that this is something that you should really consider, and we really want to look at raw data about before and after, because this is a lot of things they hadn't put in practice, would that not give us more of the results that we're looking for versus a school district that has all of these resources, all of these systems, all of the data? I don't know, I just.
I think we're looking for fertile ground rather than ground that has been turned over several times and may have left bad feelings or good feelings. You know, we're looking at how do you launch something like this? And I think Kay knows well, because we had an initiative in Alabama, 20 schools, low performing, and they did not have that, for the most part, they did not have the context of an early warning system or the idea that somebody would cope with them. And so there's a good bit of experience there. We're not doing it in the context of a full-blown school improvement model, but you're using it as one of your own tools. And I also wanted to remind you that I need suggestions from Texas.
Yes, 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 I'll be getting back with you.
I think another consideration would just be the idea of, are they already involved in some type of multi-tiered system of support work? I mean, do they see that framework as a way of operating that seems to be an easier sell, that they already sort of get that there needs to be some tiered intervention for students?
It may be easier, but it may be difficult. If you go back to our team discussion, if you got your ITI team or your multi-tier system with support team and then this team and then that team.
Yeah.
So that might be a good experimental case.
Yeah, I think it does depend.
But that might be another survey we send out for the next week or two. We'll draft a list of criteria from this conversation and get you to all to think about it. Give us some suggestions against that. Sound good? Okay. Well, that's our main next step, and then the May meeting, where we hope to have all these recommendations synthesized and clarified, boiling down into a shorter paper as well as these longer papers.
I have two questions about the May meeting. Thanks, to answer quickly. The first is how to organize that day and a half effectively, right? I think it's most people are interested in living this work and helping evolve it into considerations over 10 months. You'll be there, so there'll be a strong voice of people who can sort of explain the framework and strategically place you. So there's a more steep person in each table or something like that. But a number of these folks have only been here the last May and want to see the evolution. Some folks will be coming for the first time. We are trying to use this again as sort of our final big feedback on this, our set of stuff, whether in guideposts or recommendations or supporting documents. Just what's the best use of that those people in that time, right? I mean, it's on one hand, it's too much stuff to go through. On the other hand, even here a little bit, if we go too much out of sequence, then you're asking yourselves, where does this fit, right? Even though you've been involved in it. So again, maybe no easy answer here. It's one of the things we're wrestling with over the next 2 months is really how to organize that time. So it's both productive for the people who come, but it's also productive for us, right? It's trying to work both ways that we can actually get some good feedback from it to help finalize it and not have people be like, well, the feedback I gave was partly because I was confused about what I was being shown, right? That's what I'm trying to do.
But all three groups are in one.
Yes.
Yes.
Because I was just thinking about that on the evaluation. I think it's helpful to, number one, have the handouts prior to, which kudos for this time, because that was really good. But maybe if you go in and assign us where we're gonna be with that group, we can have a conference call with that group, with all the documents, so that we can get some of that first time reactionary out. So when we come here, it will be, that has a product,
Right.
a seamless
Yep.
type of product.
Yeah. Or even maybe halfway between, you could have a pre-conference webinar where we could explain some of the underlying rationales and how it fits together, try to answer some of those questions.
I'm planning to bring someone with me to the next meeting that has not been part of any of this, who would be fresh eyes coming in to listen and to hear. And I know that both for people who might be new to this, who might be seeing it for the first time, and I think to us, I know for me, I got a little lost in conversation over the last couple of days, and it might be nice to have some sort of a graphic, a logic model, or something that would tie it all together, because it sort of is beginning to feel a little bit scattered. And so we need to find a way to pull it back together and say, this is this step, and this leads to this, or something to that effect. That might be a really helpful thing, not just for new people, but I think for those of us that are sitting in the middle of it too, to actually have a kind of that touchstone to come back to.
Great, and send that, the name of send that first in to us. And the others, if you have strong recommendations, aside from the state, I mentioned, send those in as well, either from your own network and state or district.
Would you mind us sending you ideas for dissemination too?
No, love you. We are open to ideas, corrections, ideas.
So the final outcome from those 2 days would be, we would get feedback from the field on the documents that we've provided in each of those areas. So would every person go that we bring that's new, they only sit, like, if I brought someone and I'm on the response team, would they only see the response, but they would see everything?
Everything. The idea is to be an integrated team, to pull everything together.
How many people are you expecting?
Sorry?
How many people are you expecting?
I think about 120, 130 approximately.
What?
We're aiming for.
I thought the first session where there were speakers, and I think Angela, didn't you do one of the sessions last time, that talked about how this was used in other areas, might also be helpful since there'll be new people there as well.
And that's been a question we've had. Should we have panels and speakers? There were mixed reactions last year. Some people liked speakers and panels very much, and some people wanted more time to talk among themselves. So I'm curious just what the sense of this group is.
I think for me, as long as there's a balance, but it gave me real life examples of how people use this in practice.
Okay.
I'm kind of envisioning some sort of jigsaw. I really liked over the last day and a half how we were able to read the things and talk about them and talking in large groups. So something that mirrored that, I think, if you're asking about process.
Other thoughts?
Joanna, one thing I'm a little bit unclear about is how this work is set apart or is clearly a value add to some other national initiatives. Today I found myself thinking about the Ready by 21 model, the idea that you kind of got core and these ancillary pieces. How is this the same, different, next generation to some of those models that have been around for a little bit of time? And how do we communicate that, I guess, that evolution?
And maybe add to that a little bit. I even right now still have some scope questions. Like what's the scope of the work here? Is our ultimate product a set of recommendations? Is it a framework? Is it actually build a system? That manage the data and report it. How then does it fit in with other initiatives that might be trying to do some of the same stuff as well? So I think, I don't need those answers right now, but making sure people are aware of what it is that this is and what would be the scope of work for states or districts that wanted to move in this area. Like, what is it we're doing for them and what is it that they would need to do to unlock?
Yeah, I want to echo that. I don't need to punctuate that point too much, but right now, a lot of people think of early warning systems, at least in my context, that's just the data, right? And they think of the actions associated with the data as something altogether different. Usually some form of MPSS. And so I think being able to express how the data itself is different because we're actually using it. And they've been kind of like, well, you have the data and then we deal with the actions, but there's not a whole lot of like, how does the data actually inform the conversation around the action? So making sure that people understand that relationship as it relates to college and career readiness or whatever we call that, adult success.
And that may go back to our discussion about the title of this. We call it EWS. EWS misses response, basically, which is what is been some sense that it has never gotten strong enough there, but that we wanted it to be. So do we need another name? Different way of explaining it? Might get a survey on that too.
Just another thought, following up on the comments over here, and then going back to that idea of a logic model or something. I think another piece that probably needs to be very prevalent somewhere in all of this are what's the objective? I mean, I just asked Eli, so what is it that you all are really behind here, essentially? And he immediately gave me 4 things. This is what we're looking at. And so I think those kinds of things are very important as well, because just so that we know what is our overall objective, what are we trying to do, what does this look like, and maybe even the evolution of early warning systems, and now how we're trying to move that toward early warning systems and response, so that they can see what's happened and where we're going as well.
You like, want to say anything?
I mean, do you want me to run through what I just said to you? I hope we're aligned on this. Yeah, so I mean, I would say that the 4 objectives are, number 1, draw upon the knowledge of this group of people engaged in this work to capture learning and resources and artifacts to make it easier for school systems, networks of schools that are not yet doing this work to get started and have to do less of reinventing their own things and kind of making mistakes people have already learned from already. Number 2, provide a network for people already engaged in this work to just get to know one another, be able to provide some mutual support and just learn from one another. Number 3 is build on the collective knowledge of everyone to envision, on-track early warning systems aligned to college readiness and pathways to adult success, and make sure that that's really grounded in real knowledge of practitioners, and try to provide some useful resources along those lines for folks who want to make that evolution, what that could look like. And then lastly is create the trajectory so that a network of people engaged in this type of work could be an ongoing resource, so that in the future new school systems that get involved can be a part of a network like this. Anything that you would modify?
No, I think that's the core. I mean, it is really how to pool our knowledge to both move the field forward, to extend it to this even bigger goal of post-secondary success for all and adult success eventually. Also to do, I would say the one additional piece is to do a little bit of just field defining and field shaping. So as these terms get out there more broadly, they don't lose all meaning. And everyone's like, oh yeah, early warning, I know what that is. And then you can find it 10 different ways. Right? We're trying to add a little bit of a voice of those that have done it first to be no, it's actually this. You can do something else and call it something else, but the intent of early warning or tiered interventions or really it's really bringing the 3 big ideas. I would say it's actually 4 big ideas together, and trying to define that as whether we call it early warning or indicator or responses or whatever it is, that it's the idea of progress monitoring everyone, right? It's the first sort of big idea, and then using predictive indicators to key outcomes to do that. Then building a way to analyze that data into this sort of tiered response, right? To be effective and efficient from what you're doing prevention in whole school, or what you're doing for groups, what you're doing for individual kids, and trying to have it be get the efficiency of it. You don't go to the individual kid first, that's your last stop. and then a system to keep track of what you've done so you learn from it. that you actually develop knowledge of how to be effective from actually keeping track of what you've done and learn from it. And that's the step we know. I'd say all of this, I would agree, that's where people run out of gas. And they're so invested in the work, and that has prevented a little bit of like field knowledge from building, because it's always, it's just lost in the place of like what work. It's not transferred up. So at some level, now even further divide, I think that's the work we're trying to do together, and extending that to post-secondary success. And then it's the rest that falls from that. Like, what's the best way to call it? What's the best way to name it? What's the best way to build upon what's already there? What's the best way to integrate it into existing systems? Like, those all sort of flow as second level, incredibly important questions. But the big picture is sort of the four Eli said, and I guess again, trying to do this as a, it's not the right, people, this would be an example, people would misconstrain this, but some level I almost call this as like a human technology system, right? It is like, how do you like create a system, and it is a technology that goes from monitoring everybody against some important goals, using predictive indicators to figure out who, when, and why to act, creating an efficient response system, and then keeping track and learning from it, right? To me, that's like a big technology in a way. And I think it is the thing we've shown some good evidence that schools can get. I mean, that's the hopeful thing. There's a lot of things around the edges, practices, but by and large, right, there's still this powerful thing that a decade ago, or maybe 12 years ago, you would find modern early warning systems in a couple of Philadelphia middle schools and a couple of Chicago high schools, right? And now we're struggling to say, like, well, it's going to be so widespread, we have to define what the term means, right? That's like pretty rapid social diffusion, which tells us there's something there, right? It's actually work in the fabric of school.